Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Mark Gannon, Director of Client Solutions here at Netcall, and I'll be chairing today's webinar. It's really great to have so many of you on this webinar today. So if you've come to hear about Liberty Spark, then you're absolutely in the right place. In a moment, I'll hand over to Craig, who's going to tell you about Spark and show you a little bit about how the system works. But firstly, just on Spark. So Netcall acquired Score, as it was known, and has been subsequently renamed to Spark 6 months ago, because we felt that it was just a real perfect fit with our Liberty suite of solutions. The acquisition of Spark has really enabled us to expand our digital transformation offering to customers. So Liberty Suite's now really a unique one-stop shop for mapping, analyzing, and automating processes and customer engagement using the whole breadth of all of our solutions. Obviously, most of you will already be familiar with the Liberty Suite and how it can help you transform how you serve your customers. You'll also know, though, that understanding the process flows that drive those interactions is a really imperative part of making them better. Just digitizing per processes gets you per digital processes. Spark allows organizations to easily map and analyze those processes to really drive improvements and innovation within any organization. And Craig will tell you more about that. So I'll just introduce Craig before handing over to him. Craig is Netcall's Head of Client Solutions for Process Improvement. And he's going to take you through Spark in the next 20 minutes or so, show you how it works. If you do have questions, please pop them in the Q&A, and we'll have some time at the end to answer some of those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Craig.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. And yeah, wonderful to see you all joining us today to learn more about Spark. Given that we've got 20 minutes, this is really going to be a very high level overview of the platform. So I want to give you a little bit of background, some of the philosophy, if you like, behind the platform, and then take you through a bit of a demo of some of the key features. But as I said, it being such a high level demo, then if you see something you like, or there's things that you haven't seen but have heard, would like to learn more, then we'll touch on the end and how you can find out more about the platform. So what is it? I mean, Mark's done a pretty good job of kind of introducing the basics, but essentially it's a process mapping, analysis, management and improvement platform. But more importantly, I think, as I said, is to touch just a bit on the philosophy behind it, why we built it in the first place, what problem were we trying to solve? So I just want to give you a bit of background to that. But essentially, the key driver for us when we put this together was around how could we engage stakeholders better in change and transformation projects. So we built Spark from the beginning to be human-centric, to be focused on everyone in an organization, not just technical audiences or business analysts, but really to be able to speak to anyone so that we could really make it an inclusive platform for process improvement. The other key decision that we explored right from the beginning was about making sure that all the data is connected. So often in change and transformation projects, we're working with lots and lots of different documents that are unconnected and often stored in different places, all containing data or information that is related to each other. But by virtue of the fact of these unconnected documents, just increases the complexity and therefore the difficulty in delivering successful change. And so we really wanted to address those two problems right from the beginning. But before I go into that in a little bit more detail, let's just give you a bit of background to Spark. So we've got over 50 active customers using the platform, and we've got a really diverse set of industries that we operate in. So here we just got a selection of those: outsourcing, recruitment, software and technology, construction engineering, life sciences, defense manufacturing, and so on. But I think what's particularly interesting about this is that we see the same kinds of challenges around process and delivering change and transformation, regardless of the industry. And what we do see that's common is the use cases that we see across those industries. And again, this is just a selection of the most common things, but the use cases I've put here have been very much put in almost in an order of in which they happen. So typically we'll see organizations start with something that can sometimes be quite tactical, might be a small scale change or a large transformation. But there they're applying the platform to do discovery, to understand the processes, to gather requirements, build the business case for that particular change. But actually what then happens is that process that they've captured as part of that discovery piece really becomes a valuable asset that can be used to then support users through the implementation phase of the change. And so it becomes an operations manual that's a reference point for all people within the organization, whether they're experienced members of staff or indeed new starters onboarding. And that in itself then becomes a foundation for continuous improvement in the long term, as well as things like compliance teams, quality and standards, and many more. You can find us on various review websites. So you'll see on Capterra, we've got a 4.9 out of 5 star from a variety of reviews, again, from a lot of these different industries. In previous years, we have been leaders in customer support and also features and functionality within the platform. So we got a lot of great feedback and support from those existing customers. But let's go back to that philosophy, or that the challenge that we are addressing with the Spark platform. So I mentioned before about the complexity of change and transformation. So what we see in organization after organization is that we're trying to achieve various strategic objectives. So for many organizations, we're looking at how do we increase revenue, but at the same time, how do we maintain or reduce the current cost base? How do we improve or maintain quality and customer experience? And all the time, we're making sure that we comply with various laws and regulations. Most of the strategic objectives we see will fit into one of these buckets. And in order to achieve that, organizations will run one or more initiatives. These initiatives are often pulling in slightly different directions. They're often sharing sort of common teams and really pulling people in different directions in terms of time and attention to deliver them. So the landscape is often very, very complex in which we're operating. And to try and help address that, what we really need to do is to try to identify what the single story that runs through this, or in other words, the red thread that runs through all of these different initiatives, a single consistent story that can help everybody understand why we're doing these things and what we're trying to achieve with them. So one of the key challenges is that complexity. Another major challenge that we see in change and transformation is resistance to change. We've got lots and lots of different people being impacted by these programs, and they're often asking questions like, why do we need to do this? What's it actually going to look like when it comes, and how does it affect me individually? Now, often we think purely about the individuals at the, if you like, the coal face, those are most impacted by the change. But really, there's lots and lots of different audiences that all need something slightly different from, or to understand something slightly different from the change that's impacting them. The need for the change, what does the future look like, and how it's affecting them all individually can all be different from different teams. So for example, finance may be interested in what's the return on the investment of this change. HR and people might be looking at what the training needs are going to be, or the changes in competency that we're going to need to implement within the organization to make that successful. Operations are those that are probably going to be most impacted by the change. IT want to know what the impact on the system landscape might be, and so on. So there's a story that goes through any change, but there are different audiences that need to read into that story or need different things from that story. I think of it as a great movie. Any movie will have a story that runs through it that people will recognize, but a great movie is one where the whole family can sit down and it will be richly layered so that different members of the family will take different things from it and still enjoy the movie, even though that they'll recognize different things within it. And it's a little bit like that with telling the story of change. So how do we do that in Spark? Well, we start with the processes, which I'm sure doesn't come as any surprise, but the approach that we take is one that is user-friendly. I used the term before, human-centric. So we're really trying to tell the story of these processes, but in a way that can be understood by anyone across the organization. So rather than trying to focus the processes perhaps on a specific audience, we have to create a standard and consistent story that works for everybody across all of these different initiatives and teams and departments within the organization. That's the core of where this starts. What we then build on that is the ability to link to lots of different types of data. So we can link all of that data through the processes so that all of those different audiences, they all start and work from the same red thread, that same story that runs through everything. But they can then from there get the information that they need that's relevant to them. So again, for example, our IT department, they want to know what the systems are involved in and what processes those are involved in, what roles or responsibilities are impacted by a potential change to those systems. Compliance want to know that the controls are in place, and again, who's responsible for those controls and perhaps what systems are involved with them. I mentioned finance before might be interested, or leadership could be interested in or will be interested in what's the cost and benefit from this. All of that information can be all contained in one place, but doesn't need to be displayed to everybody all the time. So it's all about being user-friendly. So a single, clear, and succinct story or process that everybody in the organization can follow. Data that's connected so that different audiences can get what they need from that information. And one that I haven't really talked about so far, but is just as important, is collaborative. Right from the very beginning, and we'll look at this in just a second, is when we map the processes in the first instance, we get people involved, we get stakeholders involved so that they understand the need for change right from the beginning, but are involved throughout, as I said before, right through to the implementation, where they can reference it, where they can provide feedback and improvement ideas in that process moving forward. Okay, so I think at this point what we'll do is we'll go into the Spark and have a look. Okay, so as I said, we talk about the product or the mapping interface as being built to map processes at the speed of conversation. So I'm going to use a very simple example. A process might start with some sort of inbound inquiry coming in. That will then mean some sort of review taking place. As well as the activity that I'm describing, I can start to add roles against that. And I can even add systems to steps within the process. That step results in some sort of output. So my inquiry meets the criteria, but equally that might not meet the criteria, and I might have another output that comes from that. This can then lead to further activities. And so on. I might need to add additional information to these simple steps that I've captured so far. And again, I can do that very simply. I can add text-based information that might help the person following that process to make the decision. I could list out what the criteria are for the for that inquiry, or for the review of that inquiry to take place. If I needed to provide or add a sub-process here, again, it's just a very simple click of the button. I create a new page. I have the inputs and outputs from my parent activity available to me, and I can continue mapping at a detailed level. The system creates a breadcrumb. So if I'm in a sub-process or a sub-process, I can always see what the route is to get back. And once I've done that, the diagram will show with this icon on it, so that any user following the process can see what they need to click to be able to go into that more detailed information. And we can add other information as well. We can start to become much more sophisticated. We might want to capture improvement opportunities against the process, requirements, or even risks. And I can categorize my risks and describe what they are. I can add them across multiple processes. And all of this information that we put in here can all be reported on very easily, so that we can understand what those relationships are between the risks, the requirements, the steps in the process, and even the roles and systems that we've got on there. But once we've mapped our process and we've identified the potential improvements that we can make, we may then want to build a business case, so we can start to understand or prioritize which of those improvements that we're going to implement. And what I'm going to do is just jump to a slightly different example. Here I've got an example of invoices coming in from suppliers that need to be processed within the organization. We can add quantification information to the steps in the process. So how long does this step take? How many times does it happen? Is there any waiting time before we can start? And are there any costs? And we can do this step by step within the process. Often when you look at individual steps in the process, it's not obvious where something's potentially going wrong. But we bring all this data together and we can visualize it in a way that really helps us. So we can start to look at things like, well, what's the overall length of this process? How much time will we actually spend working in the process versus waiting? The charts help us start to identify where potential bottlenecks exist in the process, and also helps us understand which roles might be responsible for those bottlenecks. We can look at costs. How much does it cost to run a process? Again, this is one of these areas where often when we look at a process in a single iteration view, the impact of that cost might not mean much to us. So we can start to explore scenarios. What if we were doing that process 1,000 times a month? What would that look like over a year? And we can start to see the impacts of that as we extrapolate that out across a longer time period. What we can do is we can then start to go and explore the impact of changes to that process. What if we removed a role or automated a particular step? How does that impact both the time and the cost of the process? Again, I've got an example here where I've taken the same process but automated specific steps within it. And then I can start to look at the impact of the costs on the process. So here I can see by automating specific steps in my process, I've been able to save around £80,000 per year. Again, if you were looking at a piece of a system or automation that you were going to implement that may be at £100,000, you can see straight away that you're going to meet that return on investment within less than 2 years. And it's very, very easy to build this up and start to explore these different scenarios. So we've done our discovery, we have built a business case, and now we can look at how do we actually then support the users when we're rolling the system out. We start talking about the process library. There's various ways that users can access the information in here. There's a powerful full text search across all the processes within your implementation. But users can also come through and look at and navigate through by role, for example. Or in this, what I'm going to show here is a landing page where we might guide users through to specific things. So in my story here, I need to buy something as part of doing my work. So I can click through on business purchases. And this brings me to a process view where you can see the input starts with a requirement for goods and services. So I'm the buyer here. I have this requirement for goods and services. So the first thing I need to do is raise a new requisition in the system. And I can see the system I need to use is the ERP. As I showed before, I can even see that there's a paperclip icon. So I know that there's additional information alongside this box. So if I click on this, it provides me a link that will take me to that ERP. There's a link that takes me to the corporate purchasing policy, so I can reference that if I need to. And we've even embedded a simple video in there. So if we wanted to show the user step by step within the system what buttons they needed to click in order to raise that requisition, we're doing that all from one place from within the process. If the user notices anything that they want to change, or there's something that's not quite right, or something they think they can improve, then it's very easy for them to come in here and leave comments against the process. I can leave a comment. I can even attach this to a specific point within the process. And when a comment gets left against the diagram, then the process owner, the various followers or collaborators within that process will get notified, and they can come in, have a conversation, and then explore whether this is something that needs to be implemented. Processes are controlled within the system. So again, here I can come in and see as a user that I can have a good degree of confidence that this is the right process for me to use. I can see it's version 8 and it was published in May. So again, gives me confidence to be able to, that I'm following and using the most up-to-date information. And I just want to touch on just at a very high level of the product roadmap moving forward. We've got, as you'd expect, quite a lot of things on the product roadmap, but I've just picked 3 highlights out here. So one of the key areas that we are working on and exploring is integration with the Liberty Create platform. We've actually got a number of different ways that we're looking to integrate with Liberty Create, including things like extending some of the features and functionality within Spark itself. But one of the most exciting ones that we're working on is the ability to define a process within Spark and then push that into Liberty Create as the building blocks for an application. So really starting to accelerate or further accelerate how quickly we can move from identifying an improvement to actually implementing that improvement with automation. We also are building further process imports. So by process imports, what I mean there is any existing process documentation that you may have. We have some already that we can import from various different tools, but we're extending that out. One of the biggest ones that is imminent will be things like importing from Visio process diagrams. So diagrams or processes flows that you already have will be able to bring into the Spark platform and really start to take advantage of some of the features that I've shown you today, all within a single place. And the other one that I just wanted to highlight here is what we currently call the process improvement tracker. But essentially what this is all about is being able to follow the life cycle of an improvement. So from ideation through to building the business case and actually through to implementation. So we can really start to understand what sort of activity the organization is taking to identify improvements, and then how have we got on in terms of implementing those, so that we can really start to look at what were the benefits that we anticipated and how have we delivered them through our improvement activities. And at that point, I am going to pause and see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Craig, for that. You did a grand job of getting through all that in 20 minutes. So really, really helpful. And obviously, you did say it was quite a high level whiz through. So I know there's loads more functionality within the solution. We do have some questions actually. So I'll take them in the order that they were submitted. So the first question is from Louise Jones. Do your process map icons follow a standard model, e.g. UML, BPMN?
Great question. So the example that I showed in the demo just now actually follows, is using UPN, so Universal Process Notation. It's a systems modeling approach, which, again, going back to the beginning of my presentation, we talked about being human-centric. It's really designed to be just sort of described in very natural language, limiting the number of symbols and shapes you use to try and meet that wider audience. Through the work we're doing around importing, I just mentioned importing Visios, then obviously the platform needs to be able to support modeling and different types of notation as well. So those will be in there too. Certainly BPMN.
Great, thanks, Craig. I can answer the next question, which is from Richard Drinkwater. Is the webinar being recorded, and if so, will it be shared? Yes and yes. So that'll come out very shortly after the session. Joe Williams, how does the platform help keep processes up to date?
Well, that's a huge question. So obviously one of the things that I haven't touched on in there is around what happens after we've published a process. I talked a little bit about the commenting feature and the collaboration. So simply by making processes easy to follow and accessible and easy to find for users, then hopefully we get better pickup and usage of the platform. But we have some more sophisticated capability in there, which will do things like schedule ongoing reviews for processes to make sure that people come back and review them and update processes in the long term. We have some gamification features which encourage people to make improvements and update their process on a regular basis. And we've got dashboards for process owners and leadership to really help encourage continuous process improvement at an organization level as well. So again, those are things that we simply don't have time to touch on today, but we can certainly follow up after this session with anyone who's interested.
But I guess that's having long used things like Visio to map processes in the past. I mean, what happens generally is that you map processes and then they just kind of sit on a drive somewhere or sit, and you never revisit them until you have to for the next project. Whereas obviously with Spark, the idea is that you're constantly iterating, constantly developing.
Exactly, and I think we go back to all of those audiences that I mentioned before. Many of those audiences have a requirement to be engaged in process all the time. I mentioned compliance and quality and standards. So often, if you can create a platform that has processes that's useful to everybody, you'll often find teams like that are driving that continuous update of the processes.
We've got 1 minute left, and we've had a rush of questions. They're all kind of related to the same. I mean, Craig, you touched on the integration with Liberty Create. So there's a few questions here. How does the platform? How does it connect with Liberty Create? Any idea how long integration with Liberty Create will take? Are the processes able to be imported into the existing Liberty Create process screens?
Yeah, they are all related. Look, there's a number of different ways that the integration can work, as I mentioned before, different things that we are exploring. It's a roadmap. We're obviously working on this as fast as we can, and we'd like to get something out certainly before the end of the year, if not before then. One of the areas that we're prioritizing is essentially that ability to take the processes from Spark and push them into Create. But there are lots of other two-way integrations that we can do between the platform, both sending data into Create, but also bringing important data about the development of apps, but even the execution of the apps back into the Spark platform to give a much more holistic view of those improvements that you make. So it's an ongoing piece of work. Obviously, we're focused on trying to get something as quick as we can, but it will continue to evolve over time.
A question: how will Spark be made available? I mean, so it's available in the Liberty controller for anyone who wants it. But equally, Craig, if someone wants to get their hands on Liberty Spark, how do they do that?
Well, I guess the either contact your account director or a member of the team here at Netcall, or equally you can go onto the Liberty Spark page on the website. There's a big button that says "Show me a demo." I think we have the similar sort of thing within the controller as well, and we can get something set up for you. Thank you very much.